Hi, I'm Fred Skaggs, retired pastor and marriage and family therapist. Welcome. My subject today is dealing with discouragement. My text is Numbers 11, highlighting verses 1 through 15. He pulled out a roll of bills big enough to choke a horse. He held them up and looked at me with a determined eye, and yet with a sense of sincerity, and said, "Preacher, when I tried to live like a Christian, I was broke all the time." It was in Pawnee, Oklahoma that I met this gentleman, an automobile dealer. The story went something like this. After a long effort to press the claims of Christ upon him, he finally made that commitment. His wife and children were very active in the life of the church. It looked like a real victory for both the church and the family. Mr. Jones, as we will call him, then began what both his pastor and Mr. Jones's wife admit was a determined effort to live a God-honoring life. This meant changing some things he had been doing, and he told me that he did his best to purpose within himself to run his business in a Christian-like manner. Something began to happen. He was not able to explain it because he simply didn't understand what it was. But things went from bad to worse. He began to lose money. Business fell off. For the first time in his life, he began to have bills he couldn't pay. He said, "I prayed about this, feeling sure that something would break. Things got worse, and I sought the advice of Christian friends. As I continued to watch him, his voice dropped. He began to stare at his desktop and occasionally glance up into my eyes. I felt a pain I couldn't see, but I knew it was there. He looked as though he was embarrassed at what he was getting ready to say. His brow furrowed, and while he didn't say it, it was perfectly obvious that he wanted to say, 'I think I got a dirty deal.' Or maybe he wanted to say, 'It doesn't work after all.' In fact, he did say, 'Reverend, I'll never go through that again.' What do you say at a time like this? The only thing I could say was, 'I'm sorry. I'm so very sorry.' His look at me hurt worse than anything that had been said. It seemed to convey the feeling that, 'It's all right, preacher. It must be embarrassing when your product won't hold up to testing.' He then said with utmost sincerity, 'Well, it's different strokes for different folks. Religion is all right for some people, I guess. It just doesn't seem to be my cup of tea.' I gave up on the idea of explaining and simply said, 'I've been discouraged too. I think I know how you're feeling. I don't know why these things happen. And it's true, they don't make a lick of sense. But God is bigger than this experience.' Question: have you ever felt like that? Sometimes storms seem to know where you live, and you feel like they've got the key to your house. It happens to everybody. 50% of pastors leave the ministry within 5 years of graduating from seminary, most because of discouragement. A young lady I know well was facing some issues in her personal life at college. In describing her feelings and how they were affecting her attitude and her performance, she put it this way so well: 'I've lost my fire. I've lost my fire.' How can we handle discouragement when things come to us like this? I don't want to oversimplify this issue because discouragement is too big a deal for that. I've been there too. But I've learned some things that have greatly helped me in times like this. I've seen them work with other people, and I'd like to suggest them for you if you're struggling at this moment. First of all, be honest with God about your feelings. Many times we aren't. Moses is a perfect example of honesty in our text for today. You can't get him any more open-faced honest than he did. He is essentially saying, I didn't ask for this job. I don't want this job. And if you can't take the problem away, then take me away. I'm tired of struggling with this issue. These people act like I'm the cause of the problem. It's just not fair to me for me to get stuck with this bunch of whiners. They're asking me, why did we ever leave Egypt? What am I supposed to say to that? Tell them it wasn't my idea? That's pretty honest, don't you think? Some people are afraid to admit their feelings to God. I guess they're afraid he's going to strike them dead for having those feelings. No, no, no. He can take it. You're not the first one to feel that way. Some of God's greatest saints have been there, done that. The Apostle Paul had an issue he called a thorn in my side that wouldn't go away. And this is what he said. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. Did he take it away? No. Was Paul happy about that? No. But he did get this message from the Lord. My grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12, 8 through 9. So far as we know, Paul never lost this thorn in the side. But he found a way to deal with the problem. He was able to admit his exasperation at this point, tell God about it, and listen. You and I need to do that. Then dealing with discouragement involves saying no to self-pity. Self-pity increases our misery. I have a suggestion for this. When self-pity begins to eat you alive, try thankfulness as a remedy. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds ridiculous. Ridiculous thing to say at a time like this. When I'm hurting so bad, in the middle of all the stuff that's happening to me, get back on your medicine, man, and leave me alone. That's what you're thinking. That's what you feel like. But let me tell you what has worked for me. There are always things in your life that are working right if you look for them. In some days in my life, when I began to think I was never going to get out of school, when I couldn't solve my financial problems, when I felt like an utter failure as a husband and a father, I just wanted to give up. I stopped to look at my beautiful family. My children were healthy and reasonably happy. This at a time when a man who worked for me and his wife had just had a child with spina bifida, which they lost shortly. I could go home and play with mine, love on them, and be loved by them. I had a beautiful wife who loved me and who never complained about our struggles. That helped my attitude. It didn't solve my problems, you can be sure of that, but it made it easier to face them. This issue, whatever it is in your life, may not be working right for you at the moment, but there are so many other things that are working right in your life. Think on those things and be thankful. Now let's talk about some of our if-onlys. We all get a case of that once in a while, don't we? If only I had done this. If only I hadn't done that. If only this hadn't happened. Can't you picture Moses thinking, if only I had stayed on the backside of the desert, taking care of those sheep, I wouldn't be having a bunch of whining people lining up at my tent door telling me they didn't like what they had for lunch. Don't let if-onlys control your life. Learn all you can from this discouraging situation, because every bitter experience can teach us something if we let it. Then in dealing with discouragement, Never use failure as an excuse for not trying again. Oh, we're good at that. That's when discouragement wins. You may not be able to reclaim the loss, undo the damage, or reverse the consequences of this particular issue, but you can make a new start, be wiser, and be more determined to handle issues like this better should they ever happen again. Discouragement attacks our self-worth, our patience, and our faith, and it's not a sin to admit that. The greatest danger is that discouragement will cause us to quit, to just give up if we're not careful. Moses in our text today was ready to chuck it all and go back to the far side of the desert where he was before God called him to the task of rescuing these Israelites from Egypt. Sheep don't give you any back talk. Nevertheless, he didn't go back. He went on. We can clearly see that what he did do at the moment, he bared his hurting heart to God. He got over his case of the if-onlys, and he didn't let this episode keep him from trying again to be their leader. The book of Deuteronomy has the rest of the story. Moses got them prepared and ready to go into the land God had promised them. Although it took him a generation to completely handle the issues, the day came when he sat down among these same people and coached them in what they needed to do to be successful in the task that was in front of them, in spite of his discouragements. With Joshua's cooperation, he got them to the promised land. Someone has said, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And that's what Moses did. Now, let's be honest about it. This is a pretty wild story. So let's ask, is there anything we can learn from this? Yes, there is. Open-faced honesty with God about our feelings is number one. Saying no to self-pity and the if-onlys of our lives is number two. And never use failure as an excuse to quit is number three. God will see us through the darkest night. Our experience proves that. Amen.